And welcome everybody to back to Go Astros. It is Monday, September 9th, and I want to begin this episode by wishing a happy anniversary to my bride. 24 years of post-wedding bliss. And I'm actually saying that without sarcasm. Now, joining us also without any sense of sarcasm is Andy Tom Cheston from Houston, Texas, and Brian Arbor from New York. First of all, Andy, we got to go to some games this weekend and everything. Overall, I mean, you can't ask for more. I think with a playing a team that's very good and that hits the ball really well.
I am very happy to win the series. If you want to ask for more, I would like to ask Justin Verlander to stop giving up 8 runs. That would be my ask if I get an ask. But yeah, it's since last time we recorded, we've had a really good run, even with a sweep from the Reds in the middle of that. You win a series very impressively against Kansas City, and you win a series against the Diamondbacks, both teams who are figuring prominently in the playoff scenarios that are going forward. So it's setting up to be an exciting end of the season. I'm hoping a little less excitement by the time you and I sit down on the 25th. That there's nothing really to play for, and we get to watch, Shea Whitcomb set a hit record for the franchise or something.
And hopefully discounts at the team stores because it's the last game of the season. Brian, I know you're on sabbatical, but take a second to like Andy said, really it's easy to look at the last week and say, okay, they were what 2-4, but really the last 10 games or so, it's been a pretty good Astros team.
Yeah, and it's too. It feels like typical Astros, right? They lost their series against the non-playoff team and won the series against the playoff teams. So that's pretty typical. But 2 weeks ago, last time they recorded, they were up 4.5. Now they're up 4.5 with two more weeks of the season gone. So as long as they stay the same over the next 2 weeks, that last week is not very dramatic.
Yeah, I mean, it is a 4.5 game lead, and the other thing that the Seattle Mariners are facing is not just 4.5 games behind the Astros, but there's only 19 games to play. And Fangraphs has it, I think, at 97% chance of the Astros winning the division with an 11% chance to win the World Series. So, Brian, I mean, that's it. Where the Astros really have no reason to panic unless there's an ultimate collapse and the Mariners learn to play baseball again.
Yeah, if the Astros go 9-10 over their final 19 games of the season, so 500 ball and they lose the last game, the Mariners would have to go 13-5. Not impossible, but certainly not likely for a team that has been a 500 team all season in the Mariners.
Yeah, it really does, Andy. The April thing, like if the April thing hadn't happened and the Astros had just gone 500, this really would be just about over now.
Yeah, if we hadn't had April, we'd have the best record in baseball. If you assume records being what they are, there have not been, and I know ESPN and MLB Network would tell you otherwise. There haven't been really impressive teams throughout the season. Every team that's a contender has had a little bit of a slump, a little bit of a lull,
Mhm.
as you'd expect over 162 games. But I still don't think I haven't checked on the Dodgers lately, but I don't think there is a team on pace to win 100 games. So I think maybe the Dodgers were at 98 last time I checked. So it's close, but there haven't been just dominant teams. The Astros have been the dominant team in baseball since May 1st. They have the best record in baseball since May 1st and May 8th and June 1st. And I think, it gets a little bit worse after the All Star break, but certainly top half of the league and among the better of the playoff contenders. The difference in the division has been we've gotten really, really good, and the Mariners have gotten really, really bad over that same time period. So, as much as Seattle fans want to pretend that they have given us the division, we've won at a really respectable clip since we got out of the month of April, to the point that we have a 4.5 game lead in this division, and probably are going to win it sometime in the next week or so.
I always thought
The
that argument
Astros
was.
tried to give the Mariners the division and they would not take it.
I've always thought that argument. I thought the argument was stupid when the Rangers fans made it, and it's stupid now when the Mariners fans make it. You play your 162, and how it goes is how it goes. It isn't. It isn't. I don't. I never subscribed to the idea that that team didn't win it. We just lost it. I've always thought that was silly at best. Brian, there is some bad news. And JV had another. I wouldn't even say another rough start because it's getting worse. Actually,
Yeah.
he gave up 5 to the Reds, and I think in 3 innings, and this time he gave up 8, including 2 home runs to the same guy, to count for 7 of those RBI. Um, I'm of the opinion that he will have his last 2 to 3 starts to still prove himself, and as long as one of those turns out somewhat JV esque, he will be a playoff in the playoff rotation. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, so I talked about this on Twitter. Well, I wrote an article about JV after the start in Cincinnati, and then highlighted the themes again last night. He's not getting strikeouts. One of
Mhm.
the it's actually not one of the lowest rates of his career, but it's one of the lowest compared to league average of his career. Last night he got 4 swings and misses, all were on fastballs, which is to say that his breaking pitches were not fooling batters.
Yeah.
Let's talk about his sort of lack of command and his sort of strikes being down. That's less a function of the ball being in the strike zone than the function of not being able to get players to chase balls out of the strike zone. And as a result, the Diamondbacks last night were waiting on fastballs. Both home runs were off fastballs. Most of the hits were off fastballs. They were just spitting on his breaking pitches. So, um, you know,
Yeah, I think he
and
had no called strike on a breaking pitch last night.
yeah, and that's fine not to get a lot of called strikes on a breaking pitch, right? It's the not getting a whiff on a breaking pitch that really sort of stood out to me because again, this is what good pitchers do: is they get batters to chase pitches out of the strike zone for either weak contact or swing and miss. He's not getting enough. He's not getting enough swing and miss. Part of that is also looked up in this in my article. His velocity is down. His velocity is down probably because he's 40 years old, and all our velocity would be down at 40 years old. Just you, me, and you, me, and Andy were never Hall of Fame quality pitchers.
My velocity in the
That,
bedroom's still up
that
though.
is maybe the biggest understatement you're going to make today.
Yeah. Andy, what do you think about it though? I mean, do you feel like he gets all the runway in the world, or because a lot of people were crapping on Arrigetti's outing, which wasn't great, but then they've taken away 6 of those earned runs from him because it should have been an error on Pena, and all of a sudden it's at least looking better. Where
I
are
mean,
you at with JV?
ultimately, I don't care who those the error should have been charged to Pena. Ultimately, I don't care if Arrighetti gets charged for the runs because you still have to win the game, regardless of how the scorekeeping tends to work. So it was a bad outing against Cincinnati. Verlander had a bad outing against Cincinnati also. And I think that's what's concerning is the velocity's down. Yeah, he's 40. I still think he's working up to a certain amount of velocity that he can maintain over 5 or 6 innings if he can get there. But the fact is, he's working it out in live games instead of in Sugarland, instead of Corpus. And this is what we've chosen to do, and a player of his stature gets to do. He doesn't have command. If you remember that Cincinnati game, he walked the first 3 batters
Yeah.
that he faced, and those calls weren't particularly close. And you can argue that the umpire had a generous strike zone for the hitters, but at the end of the day, you still have to figure out what that is and throw strikes. He could not command his breaking ball.
And
And
usually a guy like Verlander actually will get benefit of the doubt calls occasionally from an umpire
but if it's not close,
if
it's
it's
not
not
close.
close. Yeah.
And if you can't get your breaking ball over, all they have to do is sit on a 94-mile-an-hour fastball, which in baseball in 2024 isn't that fast. I read something, it's about the equivalent of an 87, 88-mile-an-hour fastball
Oh,
when the Astros were good in the 80s,
wow. Okay. Especially if
comparatively.
it's 90, especially if it's 94 and has no movement to it, right?
Well,
Like,
you look at the kid that the Diamondbacks threw last night, who is regularly hitting 98, 99 throughout his innings pitched. That's what velocity looks like these days. What
yeah.
Verlander does is more going to be more about placement and sequence. I'm concerned that the Astros aren't going to make the hard decision because if he let's say we all hope that he figures it out over these last 3 starts, 4 starts that he's going to get. But if he doesn't, I don't see that he has a place on a playoff roster.
Yeah.
If he
Particularly the
can't
first
start
one.
a, I mean, if he can't start a game effectively without giving up 5+ runs, that's a concern. he's not a bullpen guy because he's a creature of habit. He's not a guy who is it proven in his career. If you start him early, if you start him late,
Yeah.
uh, if anything throws his routine off, he's not as effective early in a game. And in a bullpen situation in the playoffs where he might make an appearance, presumably because the starter can't go long or has had trouble or whatever, that's not him. That's not his role, and it'd be really hard to ask him to figure that out at this stage of his career. So, does Dana Brown have the courage to work with Joe Espada and say, "Look, you don't have it, and we can't afford to have you on the roster"? And I think that's going to be a really tough decision to make because I do agree that he's probably going to get every bit of leeway possible to be that third starter potentially in a playoff series.
Yeah, Brian, you have anything to follow up on that? I mean, this might be one of the last areas where we see Jim Crane exert himself because we know there's a relationship there.
Yeah, I mean, so the first thing to note here is that Verlander is going to continue to get starts, and that's less a Verlander thing than it is they want to stretch out the innings with the rest of their young starters who need to build up. So he'll get a start next week, probably on Sunday again, because they want to go to a six-man rotation, because they again want to limit innings for guys like Blanco and Arrighetti. And of course, since 97% chance they're in October, need them to have some bullets left for the playoffs. Two is one thing I've been pushing and will continue to push for the playoffs is that this is a team that should be looking to use some of its excess starters as guys who throw the third time through the order.
Mhm.
And a time through the order to the third time through the order. I think Spencer Arrighetti, I think would be really good at that particular role. And so that's what I'm hoping he's able to do in the playoffs. So put those together, they don't have to make this, many people have raised this question, and they certainly could, but they don't have to have an answer to this question until Verlander gets 2 to 3 more starts. Will he do better in those? He's unlikely to give up 8 runs. He's never done that, hasn't done that since 2013 in over a decade. But the Cincinnati outing was more disturbing to me
Okay. Why is that?
because he wasn't able to get he was sometimes he just gives up even at his best he gives up hard
Yeah,
contact.
he was always
Just
prone to
beat
home
him.
runs every now and again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
some guys just beat him on a fastball. He's usually able to limit those to solo home runs because he has so few guys on base.
Mhm.
And he's getting guys in base in both teams because he can't strike guys out, and he's getting balls that are falling in with BABIP. And so his inability to sort of strike batters out is the thing I'm most looking for to see if he can start getting some whiffs.
It'll be interesting too because if we keep counting the way we're counting, he started last night, so he's probably going to start Saturday against the Angels. He'll miss the Padres, and then he'll start again at home against the Angels. So if there's something that can make you feel right as a pitcher, it probably
Yeah.
is playing the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, California, whatever they're called this month. So he has that going for him. That last potential start against Cleveland somehow will be really, really interesting. If he makes that, he takes it. But those are the 3 spots he's got. The Astros are also about to enter a stage starting tomorrow of playing 16 games in a row without a break, because why not do that right before the playoffs? That's neat. Um, Feels like we have one of these every year that come at the most inopportune times. So it'll be interesting to see. He's got to prove not just that he can beat the Angels twice, but that he can dominate the Angels twice, because that would go a long way towards making people feel better about potentially opening up against the Twins in a 3-game series, or pitching one of those games at least.
Yeah, I don't think people realize this. The Diamondbacks lead the major leagues in run scoring,
Yeah.
and
I
part of
mean,
why they do that is
yeah.
they have a really what's that?
No, I was going to say, Andy and I noticed that on Saturday that
Yeah,
that's up and down that lineup. There
yeah,
was nobody under 700 OPS. I mean, it was
yeah.
a good lineup.
Yeah. And that's why is that they don't have hitters you can take a break against, essentially. They don't have ones you can just dominate. They are deep. There's no sort of Corbin Carroll's probably a superstar. He didn't play like that for the first 3 months of the season. But they don't have any weak spots in that lineup.
Well, and
So,
at some point,
but then again,
baseball.
they're a playoff team. Go ahead, Andy. Sorry.
No, at some point, baseball's baseball. There is games where a Pavin Smith is going to come out of nowhere and hit 3 home runs, and you just tip your hat and move to the next game. like you said, I was far more concerned about the Cincinnati start and then the follow up to the Cincinnati start. Regardless of who he was facing last night, he could have pitched better. He didn't.
Yeah. No, 100%. And I do think, I don't know. There's part of me that just has watched JV enough now to know that if there's something to figure out, he will figure it out. And if it's, I even can suspect him feeling like if he doesn't have it anymore, almost changing the way he pitches, though we might not see that this year. We did get two offensive pieces back, one back physically in Kyle Tucker. Honestly, I thought he had a pretty good weekend. He had a couple of RBIs, a couple of runs scored. He still taking walks when he needs to and barreled a couple that didn't quite fall. But overall, Andy, what did you think of King Tuck being back?
Well, if Justin Verlander is calling what he's doing right now extended spring training, I think the same thing could apply to Kyle Tucker. He is on the roster right now simply to get his timing back. Yeah, the Astros need to win games. I'm not discounting any of that, but he's in Houston rather than being in Sugar Land or Corpus because they want him to get his timing back against Major League pitching. And again, when you're playing the A's and the Angels for most of the next two weeks, that's a good opportunity to feel good about yourself offensively. So
Right.
I'm excited to have him back. I'm excited to be able to pencil him in right field more often than not. I know they're babying him a little bit because he's not going to be 100% the rest of this year, legs wise. What you really need is his bat, and you need his bat to be at full strength, and you need him not to. Hopefully, the timing works out where he doesn't have a repeat of last year's playoff performance once we get there because it was not great. But you've got 3 weeks basically to get hot, and that's what they're working towards. Uh, it certainly makes the lineup better and deeper and makes everybody around him better because you have to respect his bats in the 4 hole or wherever they're hitting him on a nightly basis.
Like I said, Brian, too, I saw a lot of positives in his offensive performance in the two games he played. Let's see. Last night he was 1 for 2 with a walk, and he also had reached on a catcher's interference and scored 2 runs. And then on wait for it Friday, because he took Saturday off, right? Is that
Yes,
right? And then
planned day off.
planned day off, and then Friday
Right.
he was 0 for 2, but also took a walk and again barreled up a couple. So
He
to
got hit
me, I
by a
don't feel like
pitch.
he's that far off. Far off.
Yeah. And again, this is part of what happens when you are, as you said, 97% chance of making it to the playoffs. And yeah, it'd be nice if they got the 2 seed, but their chances of that are relatively low.
Okay, that's for
Yeah.
later in the show. We got one more to talk about.
All right. But hey, why are they easing back in Cal Tucker? Why do they have lineups with him and Bregman out of it? Um, because right now pressing on those guys is high risk, low reward. It's mostly low reward, and getting them back to normal is big for October, and that's where most of this team's thinking is right now. They haven't won the division yet. They're winning the division.
But it's all pretty academic, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's talk, Brian. We'll start with you with somebody else that bounced back and has looked pretty good. Chas McCormick is back. He's already looking much better at the plate. I believe he's 9 for his last 14. Um, I think a really big boost to this team if we get some semblance of the Chas McCormick from the last 2 years, particularly in the playoffs. What are your thoughts on Chas? Is there enough time for him to make you feel comfortable about him being on the playoff roster?
Yes, because I mean, two sort of reasons for that. One is, he shouldn't be this bad. We have 3 years of data that he is an average to slightly above average major league hitter, and then 1 year of the disaster that is this season.
Right.
So, bet on the bigger data, not the smaller data, particularly for those of us on the outside. Obviously, you get more
Well,
detailed data
Jessica, when she
faster.
married me, bet on the smaller data, but that's a whole other conversation.
Yes, well, happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Overcoming our wife's rationality was, I think, key to all 3 of our marriages. But that's a different
Fair.
point, different point, different
Facts.
podcast. Um, Second is the way the Astros have set their team up, particularly with getting Ben Gamble and Jason Hayward over the towards the end of the season, is they're set up to do platoons and left field, right to left field, potentially center field and first base. And we've seen Joe Espada be real aggressive about who he is pinch hitting
Yes.
in key spots. So if we can get Chaz back to being the lefty masher he's been throughout his career, platoon him with Ben Gamble, who is, real effective against right-handers, who's a league average hitter, and that's a plus at the bottom of your lineup, then that could be an effective combination. It kind of sets up for what this team is in reality.
Yeah, Andy, pile on that, and also, I mean, we've been pretty impressed with Ben Gamble since he's come over. I mean, for as much as Dana Brown's the worst GM in the history of GMs, he sure has found some pieces on the scrap heap that have really worked out, especially in the stretch when Tucker was out.
Well, I did notice you can buy a Jason Hayward jersey at the team store if you're so inclined. So somebody's really on top of the silk screening process over at Fanfare or whatever it is. Yeah, Gamble's been a great pickup. He appears to be a hitter who, at this point in his career, is not trying to be something he's not. His job is just to get on base, and for him, that's primarily going to be singles. And if he's a singles hitter, but he's a consistent singles hitter, and since he's been with Houston, I think he is batting right around 260, 256. It looks like.
Brian
Higher.
says higher.
Did he have at bat? Did he have any at bats with the Mets this year?
That's a good question.
I know.
What did you say? What did you say he was batting for Houston though, Brian?
Yeah, 294 with the Astros.
Yeah, 294
9 walks and 60 plate appearances, which is
sorry. I'm screened on the last 15 days. To get back to the point that you have time for Tucker to work it out and for Bregman to get elbows to be babied because Jordan and Jose Altuve are carrying the team right now with a little bit of help from Chas McCormick, who is third in OPS over the last 15 days.
Yeah.
Batting 370 with a 912 OPS. So you get anything close to that from him for the rest of the season, that's incredible. That's great. But Gamble provides you a great insurance policy, whether it's Tucker's health or McCormick's ineffectiveness. You've got somebody else that you can match up with. And I see if McCormick can maintain this over the next couple of weeks or stay close to it, that you have a McCormick Gamble kind of platoon in left field potentially, even though Gamble hasn't played any left field for us, with Tucker in right and Myers in left, and you accept Myers for what he is as a defensive specialist who can occasionally hit the ball. That's a pretty solid outfield in today's baseball.
Yeah, I think we would take it. Yeah, for sure.
So Gamble's been a great piece. And for me, Hayward is more vibes than anything else. He is probably a fourth outfielder at this point in his career, but he's going to provide you really, really good defense wherever he goes in. So you're not losing anything there. You're probably gaining if you have to play him in left field from that perspective. The bat, I mean, the reason he's available is he's just not hitting anymore. He hasn't hit so far with the Astros, but I like the veteran approach that he has. And sometimes you do need a good clubhouse guy for that, what is ultimately going to be the 25th, 26th guy on the roster. And if that's Jason Hayward, you could certainly do worse.
Yeah. Then was it Drew Hensley we had up there?
I think you just made up a player, but yes.
And I just made up. What was his? I don't even remember his name. I don't know. I don't even remember his name. Brian, you brought up the number, the 2 seed, and I'm seeing a lot of hand wringing on X about it. And to me, that's way cart before the horse. I'd rather a fully healthy Tucker and Bregman and play a wild card series than riding them to earn a 2 seed that, and I'm sure you're going to help us out with this. We haven't had a bye in baseball's playoffs for very often, but it seems about 50-50 whether it's effective. The Astros won a World Series having a bye, and the Rangers won one not having one. So what's up with the bye, and how important do you think it is?
So over the last 3 years where it's been present, teams that have had the bye have lost more series than they've won.
Okay.
The team that has tended to win their series despite having a bye is the Houston Astros. So, who knows? From a just strict odds standpoint, You have to play 4 rounds instead of 3, all a short series. It doesn't matter whether like 7 games aren't, it's still a short series. So it's sort of one more round of the crapshoot, one more round of Russian roulette, essentially, that you have to play.
Right.
We've been able to avoid that. But, hey, do you trust the Astros in the playoffs? The Astros have a better overall record in the playoffs in the most recent seasons than they do in the regular season. They have a higher winning percentage. So, yeah, you should trust the Astros in the playoffs. So, yeah, 3-game series isn't ideal. I have lots of negative opinions on the format. We could probably talk about that in the offseason. But, it's a crapshoot, but I like the Astros' chances, and decent chance they're going to face the Royals, who they just swept, or the Twins, who, they beat 3 out of 4 last year. So, again, like the odds.
Yeah, Andy, in the reverse of last year is this Astros home team is very good. And if they do have a wild card series, it will be in Houston. But there is the argument, right? Like, if you have, is the layoff and the rest worth possibly losing rhythm, losing momentum? And so that's where I think baseball's different than other sports. Where do you come down on this whole, like, how important is the bye?
Well, I think we're still in the small sample era, size era for this particular, the way the formats works for playoffs. We have some data that says the bye doesn't really hurt you, or it doesn't help you if you have it. If you listened to the media last year, if you were a Dodgers fan or a Braves fan, it's the worst thing that could possibly happen to baseball, and it was an abomination. Um, it's baseball. I think there is some benefit to playing every day, and it's not really even every day. It's a 3-game series with days off in front and behind it.
Sure.
It's not
Yeah.
like a football bye where you need your offensive linemen to get their knees together for one more
Right.
game. Or your running back's chest plate has to be surgically repaired and you get that extra week. I think there is some benefit to staying in rhythm. I think there is some benefit when you have veteran pitchers. Like if Verlander's going to get a start, knowing what his schedule is and staying on that schedule instead of potentially having 5-6 days off between a scheduled start and then another few days off before the start of the next series. I think that's difficult on the creatures of habit that occupy starting pitching, especially good starting pitching. Good news is we have enough young, dumb pitchers that don't know any better yet. Hunter Brown's routine does not matter in the grand scheme of things for the Astros. Spencer Getty's routine doesn't matter that much for the Astros. Justin Verlander's does. Frombers
Yeah.
probably does. So it's a lot of noise about nothing. I just there's not a lot of benefit to it, and frankly, I'd rather it build up where we end up playing the Yankees in the ALCS, just cause.
Who
Well, I do.
knows what could happen in an ALCS against the Yankees?
Who knows? Who knows? Obviously different Yankees team this year than 2 years ago. But yeah, I also feel like with the Astros strength right now being a lot of good starting pitching, I think it lends itself to being able to survive a bye much better than if it were 2 starters and a bunch of guys, which is what a lot of teams are going to roll out there. So I think at least some of the things that the Astros really are going to lean on for this at least play into their strengths. Um, Other than that, like I said, it's been a pretty crazy season. It's funny to me, and I wanted to talk a little psychology. We'll start with Brian. I think Brian, you and I have seen a lot of people that still are reacting as if this is the same April team and they're lucky to be winning. To me, it's funny. Does it frustrate you? I mean, where do you come down on some of this reaction of our fan base, and then we'll get Andy's on it because it's always funny.
Yeah. Some of the reason. All right. So my 2 favorite sports are baseball and college football. I fit in very well in this podcast because I think that's the case for both of y'all. And part of what I like about these sports is the different contrast in emotions. That LSU lost to USC in the first game of the season is a big, huge disaster for the rest of the season. It can have big implications. It used to be like completely, you have no chance of winning anymore, or you've got to win the rest of your games. We'll see now in the playoff era in college football. Part of what I enjoy about baseball is that reaction is almost never the case until the playoffs. Because, hey, you can go 7-19 to start the season. It's a complete and total disaster And the Astros have overcome that because they're really a good team and not the 7-19 disaster. And I'm looking forward to them winning the AL West so I can declare that we will never speak of April 2024 again.
Andy, to Brian's point, and I think I maybe put more value on winning the division than a lot of people. I think winning the division um, is the one true measure really of how good your team is, because it doesn't rely on small sample size and getting hot and all that stuff. And so to me, I feel like when this finally happens, this might be the division title I'm the most impressed by of the 7 or 8 that they've won here in the last during this golden age.
Well, I do think it's important for Jim Crane to let you know that's important for to win the division because you get to sell T-shirts and hats. And if you don't sell those T-shirts and hats, how are you going to have a division championship day next year to sell more tickets, or 5 years from now to have a reunion of that? I mean, you've got a lot of marketing opportunities built on winning a division,
I like
Jim.
how I'm the only one who still treats baseball like this romantic thing on this show. But go ahead, continue.
How
How can you
many
be romantic about capitalism?
how many ring days did you show up for in 2023?
Well, I had a season ticket holder prepackaged from a friend, so none. But I do have 10 of them if anybody wants some.
Exactly. Jim Crane wants you to come to the game and enjoy yourself. It's the whole. It's impressive. It's worrisome for me, just as a lifelong Astros fan, that somehow we're going to figure out as a franchise that we can dick around for the first 45 days of the season and still be successful. I know that's not real. I know nobody believes that, but I have there's an emotional hole that we talk about from earlier this season. There's an emotional hole from growing up in the 70s and 80s with this Astros team. Um, I will be
I
very
think they
happy.
call that PTSD, but sure.
I
Go
will
ahead.
be very happy with 5 more wins because that will get us to 82. That's a winning season. That didn't always happen when I was a kid. We talk about this, I think, every year.
We
Uh,
do.
it's the first step in. Well, I guess 81 is great. That's not a losing season. 82 is better. That's a winning season. And then you go from there. Uh, Looks like we're going to finish around 90, 91 wins with any luck. I say that knowing that Oakland's playing better, but we've got a bunch against the Angels left. So this team's been very, very impressive since May 1st. Like I said, they've had the best record in baseball since that period in time. That's not an accident. And so at some point, you do have to go May, June, July, August, and then part of September. 5 months outweigh one.
Yeah.
So you've got 5 months of really, really good performance versus one that was really, really bad. And it took you 2, 3 months to get out of that hole, but you did. And you've got a team that is playing really well going into the last 3 weeks of the regular season, trying to secure a playoff spot and position themselves as well as they can for a playoff run. In baseball, that's literally all you can hope for. Make the playoffs, and then weird shit happens. If you doubt that, witness our neighbors to the north up I-45 a little bit, because there was no way they should have won a World Series last year, and yet they did. I know their fan base has completely forgotten about it because it's football season now, and they're
And the Cowboys look pretty good. So
not going to make the playoffs this year.
Andy, I'd like to make an important rejoinder here.
Sure.
Bruce Bochy apparently has a very specific deal with Satan.
Next year they will be dangerous. Or maybe they won't have 15 guys have career years at the same time.
yeah, probably the second.
So yeah, I think the Astros fan base needs to give this team a little bit of a break and recognize what they're watching is a continuance of the window, not a closing of the window, at least for this season and probably into next, depending on what you can do to shore up your everyday lineup. But this is not the end of things, and I think people who got really upset by April don't understand what baseball is and that it is a marathon. And it's a horrible cliche that we talk about all the time, but you don't win the division in April. Matter of fact, you can set up yourself for horrible disappointment in April if you're the Seattle team.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're exactly right. That is the whole point of the game. It's why we like that there's a game every day. It's why it's the true measure of depth and how you build an organization from the ground up. And I think one of the things we have to give credit for is I think Dana Brown's done a really good job this season of finding pieces when there weren't the most resources with which to find pieces. I think he's navigated
Yeah.
just how bloated the payroll's gotten really, really well. And we were talking about this the other day, Brian, at the game where why is it that the Astros are the only ones who can tell a pitcher this pitch sucks, don't throw it anymore, and then all of a sudden it's like they're Cy Young or something.
Yeah, they told Yusei Kikuchi to throw your slider to the other side of the plate as a backdoor slider, and that's worked really well.
Yeah,
Which
it
again, if
it
I'm
was
Kikuchi, I'm
it
like,
goes back to 18. Garrett Cole, don't throw your two seamer down, throw your
yeah,
four seamer up, and all of a
yeah.
Okay.
sudden he's a Cy Young winner.
In 2018, it was new and innovative. In 2024, and lots of teams do this, the Astros have had a really good year. Again, I wrote an article since you've been here saying that the MVPs of this team are the pitching coaches. As part of the bigger, we talked about the pitching lab, and we had Michael Nash on here. And part of what they've done with the bullpen is find guys. Okay, Caleb Ward gave up a home run yesterday, but Caleb Ward has been a not very good pitcher for several organizations as AAA fodder, and he's been really effective, including at AAA, which is sort of the first thing I noticed with Caleb Ward. They've taken Taylor Scott again, went through lots of organizations, some with really good reputations for her pitching, for this pitching development stuff that we see with the Astros. And that's part of when you talk about Dana Brown, the bottom of the roster has gotten stronger this season because of them being able to find guys. And they've done that. The Astros teams, most Astros teams of the Golden Era, the bottom of the roster was strong because the top of the roster was so strong that you had players who shouldn't be utility players being forced down to be utility players.
Yeah.
This year has not been that. Not been that. They've had to find again guys like Ben Gamble and Taylor Scott who've been contributors despite the fact that they were waiver wire fodder.
Yeah, and Caleb, you mentioned Ort. He's got a 1.42 ERA and throws nothing but gas, Andy?
And his cut down his walks compared to the three organizations he was with before.
I mean, even Caleb Ferguson, who every Yankees fan was laughing at us for picking up or for trading, he's at a 2.81 ERA in 14 appearances with Houston. There is something that Josh Miller is able to communicate to these guys in a way they can understand it that is effective that other teams just don't do. And it seems stupid, but if I'm a free agent pitcher, I realize there's a whole lot of ego involved with this kind of decision, but if the money's there, why don't you sign with a team that makes you look better, that makes you more effective? Why it boggles my mind that a guy like Yusei Kikuchi can be as ineffective with two different franchises, and he comes here for 7 games and they go throw over there instead of over here, and it's all working for him now.
Yeah, I mean,
it's such a simple, but I think the devil's in the details with some of this stuff, and I think our pitching coaches do a really good job of digging into those details, where I guess other franchises just don't, and it's got to be frustrating for other fan bases because you pick up a Caleb Ward who Boston fans would, I mean, they were howling, and then they looked at his stats for this year. How did you do that?
Right, Brian? Any last thoughts?
It's 3 weeks before the end of the season, so enjoy the last 3 weeks. We don't get enough of this, and you're going to really, wish you enjoyed this 3 weeks when we're in December. 2, this team's going to win the division. Enjoy that.
Andy, any final thoughts?
I'm looking forward to a 3-game series against the A's, and we may be talking next week about how I shouldn't have said that out loud because the A's are actually playing well, not as well on the road as at home. I really would like to pick up some games this week as far as magic number wise, because I think we're sitting at 15 right now. We're not supposed to talk about that till we get to 10, right? Is that what the rule on the show is?
No, I don't care about that. Yeah, it's
15. All right, so it's 15 right now.
This is our last series against the Oakland A's, right? So I guess one final thought is, 1, the A's ownership has screwed the people of Oakland. Screw you. 2, they're going to Sacramento next year for, again, reasons, which again...
For 3 seasons.
For 3 seasons in
for a stadium that seats 14,000 people.
While they
part of me doesn't believe it'll be 3 seasons because, good Lord, why are they doing it for 1? Part of me believes it'll be for 30 seasons because I'm not sure they're actually building the ballpark in Las Vegas again.
To that point, the Vegas deal has not been approved. It won't even get talked about until December with the powers that be. It's going to be really interesting
Yeah.
because any free agents that you covet on the potential free agents you covet on the Oakland A's this week, you can go ahead and make plans that you can get them because they're just not going to be able to support a major league payroll.
Yes. So
It's
one,
and they're
fuck
gonna
you,
and
John Fisher, and two, all love to A's fans because we offer our sympathy. Wish we could do more for you.
yeah, and they are gonna unseat the not talked about this part is that they're gonna unseat the minor league team in Sacramento, which has been one of the best attendance stories in minor
Yeah.
league baseball, and also one of the best social stories by having the first female GM and now president of baseball ops in the sport. And who knows? Because I don't know that Sacramento can do like Houston does and basically support both teams. I think that they'll have to move at some point,
I
but that's a
lived in
whole.
Sacramento when that team got there, and it was such a big deal. They were excited for it. They'd continue to support that team, but two te none of this makes sense to me. I don't get why Major League Baseball is good with this.
But I will quote friend of the show and massive A's fan Stu Clary. He'll believe they go to Vegas when the first shovel hits the ground. And to Andy's point, we're nowhere near the first shovel hitting the ground. But we don't need a shovel up here. We are going to be back next week, hopefully talking about another good run of baseballs for Andy, for Brian. I'm heading to the doctor. Happy anniversary to my wife, and Go Astros.